Hello friends, it's Cindy Brumbaugh from CindyLeeBDesigns.com, independent Stampin' Up! Demonstrator. Today's card is featuring our designer series papers. I bet you guys have a bit of designer series paper, patterned paper stashed away. We're going to use it and show it off on this card. Now this technique, I'm calling it the opposite matching triangles. It's been around forever. Somebody at one point decided if you cut a paper a certain way, you can puzzle piece it back together. So I've seen it done many different times. So please don't think I'm taking credit for this technique. So here we go. We're looking at two different designer series papers that really match well. Now I love this new paper, the Painted Christmas, and it is a gorgeous paper. But the one thing about it is the patterns don't really coordinate on the front and back, like if you wanted to cut it and flip it around. So I wanted to find something that coordinated really pretty with the evergreen and the different greens and reds that were in this one pattern. And as you can see, these two did not pair well together. Now these two would have paired well together, but I was wanting to use the red peeking through on here. So like for instance, if you went to the Sweet as Peach paper we have, and you'll notice these patterns like this one here, it coordinates, these little peaches coordinate well with the big peaches, the blue and the peach on here with the blue here, and this pattern. So this would be a perfect paper to use that you would only need one sheet and you would make one card. But since I wanted to coordinate two different patterns here, I'm using the two different pieces. I'm going to make two different cards. As you can see, one is portrait and one is landscape. It has a little different bit of a twist there, but you can make two cards doing this technique. So we're going to be using the Christmas season bundle that comes with this beautiful stamp set with the pine cones and the holly and the leaves, and then we're going to be using the seasonal label dies for our label on there and cutting out our pine cones. And it also has some great other labels in there too, and dies that cut out each one of these pieces of foliage here. And we're also using one of my favorites, Heartfelt Wishes. Has not just Christmas, but sending love. That could be a nice sympathy, much gratitude, cheers for New Year's. So probably going to be making a New Year's card with that. So we're just going to set that aside and take a look at our papers. We're using a color palette of the Evening Evergreen and Real Red. And then these two patterns here from the Christmas Tidings paper. I do believe that's the name of this 6x6 we have, Tidings of Christmas, which is also one of my faves that was in the annual catalog, the Christmas papers that were in the annual catalog, not in the mini catalog. So what we're going to do here is first cut our designer series paper. Okay, as you can see, whenever I'm going to border something, I always cut out something. And so now I have some hearts all ready for Valentine's Day because I just can't waste this whole big piece of real red there. So this real red is going to be the border for my designer series paper. And all the measurements that I give you in this video, you don't have to scratch them down. They're in the YouTube description right underneath the YouTube video. It says visit my blog here. You can just press that link and you go right over to CindyLeeBDesigns.com and you'll see additional photos of these cards and all the materials I use and some little fun anecdotes there too. Notice that on this card, I was playing around and I messed it up and had to pull it up, but I thought I can still use it. Yes. And also under the YouTube description, I also have links to all the individual products I use in my online store and also the measurements. So it's all right there for you. If I was a little bit techier, I could have it all coming up on the screen for you, but that's not in my wheelhouse of skills right now. So here we go. The red is going to be 4 inches by 5 1/4 because our cardstock, I'm using a half of a sheet, and it is a 8.5 by 5.5, half sheet of the cardstock. And on these two cards, I cut these ones I cut them the same way. So if you look at it this way, It's one sheet of cardstock. So what you could do is you could take on the 8.5-inch side, and you could just score once at 4.25, then turn it and cut it 5.25. I mean 5.5, and you have 2 cards. But notice one can be landscape and one can be portrait just by turning them that way. And that's what I did on this one. A lot of times I have my portrait cards opening this way because they're easier to display in my classes. But this one I thought, oh wow, I can just turn it that way. And then that way I'm scoring one time and cutting one time. So there we go. Okay, so the insides of our cards are going to be 4 by 5.25 as well. We're just going to tuck them away here for a second. Put our pretty cards over there and put our borders there. And we're going to take a look at these. Now, since this border is 4 inches by 5.25, I just went down another 1/4 inch, which gave me 1/8 of an inch on each side. Excuse me. So that means our designer series paper, both pieces, are 3 3/4 by 5. So that makes a really pretty border around it whenever we put them back together again. Now, this technique, if you wanted to have like red in between peeking through from this border here, of course you couldn't cut these out, but if you did want to do that, you could cut your designer series paper down to even one more 1/4 down and be 3.5 by 4 3/4. Then, as you can see on this little mock that I did, you would have a design, you know, you'd have the red peeking through each triangle. And then you would just kind of make sure you have the equal amount going everywhere. So that's a nice concept to do too. However, I just did it the easier way. And I just went and did on this is my mock as well. And I just gave it exactly just the border around the outside. And so it's kind of like 2 different looks you can get. And I think each of them are kind of cute. This is definitely a designer series paper. It's an old one that definitely did not coordinate on either side. But you can see you can get 2 different looks. You can either have the border around just the outside, or if you cut this down to 3.5 by 4 3/4, you can pull your triangles apart and have 1/8 of an inch border around the whole thing and down through the middle. So that's something you can do. But we are just going to do the 3 3/4 by 5. So what we're going to do is stack these on top of each other. And I'm going to tell you something here. Just to keep them in place, you can take a little bit of, a little temporary adhesive, okay? This is going to rub right off, okay? So what I'm going to do is put them, you do not have to do this, but I will tell you that I already made this video once, and I don't know what I did, but my paper, and it just wasn't perfect. So if you want to put a little temporary adhesive, but if you're going to put the temporary adhesive, you don't do it in the middle because we're cutting through the middle. So just put it on either the 2 sides or a little piece here. But that's just going to make it nice and sturdy for me to cut. So you have those 2 pieces together, and we simply, like I said, this technique's been around forever. You're just simply going to cut from one corner to the opposite corner across your, the card. So put each here, I'm taking the top and the bottom on the opposite sides, and I'm putting them into the cutting groove. Put them in the cutting groove, and because I put that little spot of temporary adhesive on there, it's staying together very nicely. Okay, and then we're going to go down. As you notice, I started in the middle, because sometimes when you go from that top, from the bottom or the top, it can hit that little point. So I just start a little bit in. Okay, now you can see these are staying together pretty nicely for me. Okay, now we're just going to pop these back together, and we're going to turn them and put the other corners into the cutting groove of your trimmer. There we go, corner. I want to make sure they're perfectly in there, okay? And the corners are nice and tight together. Hold these together nicely. That's tight there. I'm going to go down and up. And it easily goes through 2 pieces of designer series paper. If you watched my stack, cut, and shuffle video from last week, you'll notice that I cut through 4 pieces. I just gave a little more pressure, but I was sure to get it. Now, look at that. I now have, I'm going to slide them out here. I now have my triangles. And I'm kind of keeping them in place because I want to use them. I want to keep them because we're going to kind of mix and match them here. Now remember, I had a little bit of that temporary adhesive over here. Now that's where I just get it taken off of there. Just rub that off right there. Okay, so now you see we have 2 triangles from each side. So what we're going to do is take let's take these 2, we're going to make 2 different cards. So we're going to take the 2 herringbone, and then we're going to take the 2 pattern foliage, and then we have this one. So we have this one left, and then we're going to put this one together. Okay, so you can do this directly. Now you can see we have 2 different patterns there. Now we can do that directly, putting it on here, but I think it's a little easier if we just tape them together. So what I'm going to do is flip these over and tape them together. Okay, so let's tape these together here. Just get a nice tight corner there. Okay, and just take a little bit of Scotch tape to tape that together. And then we know that this one is going to go here. Take another little piece of tape here, get it into my view here, and just make sure our corners have a nice sharp point. And then we'll take this other piece here and pop in there. And you can see that my corners are nice and sharp. And there we go. There we go. Now we have a beautiful pattern there. So let's go ahead and do this one as well. Okay. So we've got this one. So let's just put these ones together. And as you can see, these patterns really were kind of, ooh, but some of the other patterns are really, okay, so this one would go here. There we go. And we're gonna put some Scotch tape on there and then put our last one in here. 2 pretty cool cards, getting 2 different looks to the card. Okay, let's just get this little popped in here. They pop in perfectly when they're cut perfectly. So, and I might just put a little tiny bit right in the middle there. Okay, and I'm going to put a tiny little bit right here, just because when I go to adhere these. Okay, oop, that scared me. Okay, so there we go. We're going to be putting this onto the border. And remember, because our paper was 3 3/4 by 5, our red is going to be, and I think I might just snip that, get that off a little bit, because it seems, let me see here, or do I have it? Okay. Yes, okay. So we are going to put some adhesive on the back of the designer series paper, and I am not sure if this adhesive is ready to bite the dust. I thought I had enough left on it, so we shall see. I have my glue ready if I do need to. Okay, so once again, now the only thing about that is I get the glue all over. So I'm gonna get, I like to eyeball and get one side and the top and the bottom, and usually it'll fall into place. But I want to, like I said, it's always a weird angle when you're making a video and you can't quite tell where you're at. So let me pull this here again. Okay, I needed a little bit less on this side here. Okay, And then let's go ahead and put this one on. This one as well. This one I might try using glue because it might just be a little easier to move around. Okay, a little bit of Tombow. Always faithful Tombow. Now, if I'm going to do that, I'm going to want to put my silicone mat under there to catch any adhesive. And then I have a little wiggle room here, a little easier than using my seal. Okay. And see, that way the glue that was stuck on there remains on here. And when this dries, you just rub it with your finger and it's done. Okay, so now the next thing we're gonna do is go ahead and pop this onto the front of the card. And I'm gonna just use glue again because it's really cooperating with me today. Ha, I have a brand new glue, that's why. You know how you get out a brand new glue and you're like, oh, yay. It's just like new dimensionals, opening into a pack of new dimensionals or cutting into a new acrylic plate. Okay, so we are going to put these red bases onto the front of our card. And this is Evening Evergreen and Real Red. Oh gosh, do they just, oh, so sharp. Now, these two pieces of, I already told you how I cut these, right? Yeah, that they were one sheet there. And then we're gonna put this one on here. It's funny whenever you're making a video and you mess up and you come back to do the video the second time, you think, wait, did I say that? Did I say that? Or am I gonna repeat myself? So here we go. We can do a portrait and a landscape. And look how different they look just by the difference of the orientation of the card. So super easy now. I just used my die. It's in these seasonal label dies. I love them. I love these sentiment dies that are in here. And I used this one, and I used the From Our Family, and I'm gonna be putting that on there on each of these cards. And I just changed the orientation of the tag as well. And I put it on dimensionals. I love my dimensionals. Anytime you're making a card, like the one I had posted on Monday, is even if it's just a plain and simple card, when you pop it up with some dimensionals, changes the whole look of your card. And so we're going to put this one on this way. Just get it there. We go. Put it on that way, but we're going to change the orientation of this one on our portrait card. Makes us feel like we're like so fancy here, huh? Okay, get the same amount of green showing. There we go. Okay, so we've got that on there, and then we're going to do our little pine cones. Okay, so let me just move this aside a second because I'm going to show you how I do this super quick with my Stamparatus. So the first thing I do, now I already have this all set up, but I'm going to show you how I actually did it, okay? So the first thing I did is I put this into my Stamparatus, and let's open this up here, okay, because you can tell that your Stamparatus mat will move a little bit. That's okay. Now the first thing I did was I put a piece in here, and I stamped down my pine cones. And if this is redundant to you who already know how to do this, there might be somebody watching who doesn't. So I did my 2 pine cones. Then I took the dies, I put a die around each of my pine cones, and I went to my die cutting machine and I cut out a perfect outline. So I took this, cut it out, and look, it's a perfect outline there. Then I just came back in and put that here. And now I can take blank ones, put those in here, and I'm going to show you how we can do that. Now, one thing I did here is our Tombow Glue When it is wet, it's permanent, but if you put it on something and let it dry, it gets a little tacky. So I did that with this, and I've been doing that recently, just putting a little Tombow around the back side of here. So whenever I put it down, I put it on here, and then I would just kind of smush it around there, let it get dried out. It's tacky, then it doesn't tend to move on me. I don't even need my magnet, so it doesn't move at all, but I'll stick that on there anyhow for special effects. So now the next thing we're going to do is I just went over and didn't even have to pay attention. I just threw my pine cone dies on, ran them through my die cutting machine, and I ended up with a bunch of these, and then you just come and you put them back in here. Okay, now the great thing about this is now you don't even have to sit there and fiddle with your dies around your images on here. You do it one time and that's all. And as long as these stamps stay in this place and you use this template, because if you move these at all, of course this template won't work. Okay, so, and you don't even need to save this template. Whenever I'm done doing all my pine cones, I just pitch this template, because once I take these off, put them back in my stamp case, they are not going to be used. Okay, so on my pine cones, I used crumb cake, and I did the image that had a little bit more stamped image as my first step. And then I just come back in here. I make sure that my mat is in the top right hand corner, but you don't actually have to, as long as it's in the right place. So I'm just going to stamp down these crumb cake pine cones. And photopolymers do tend to stick to your paper, so you may find when we take this up, they may have stuck. And they did, but that's okay. You can just peel them off, put them right back in. Okay, so there we did our first color. And I didn't do it long enough, but we're just watching the video. Okay, so now I took these and I popped them right on to there, and then I put my mat down. So what I did is, to get the second one, I just took these ones, I sat them right where I wanted them, closed my acrylic plate, they were in place, and now we're gonna use soft suede to make that two-tone stamping there. So here we go, soft suede. There we go. Make sure we get our good pressure on there. Okay, and like I said, they tend to stick, so we've got one pine cone and another pine cone. Don't you just love the depth of that? Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to do it one more time. So see how easy you can mass produce these? You can do this with so many projects you're doing just by using your stamp apparatus. Okay, so we used crumb cake. Make sure I'm using the right color here. And that was my first one. And like I said, you don't even have to have your magnet in this case. Oop, I knew it was going to stick to my stand there. Okay. And I'm doing crumb cake first for the base of the pine cone. I saw somebody use cork, and they stamped on cork. Oh my gosh, it was so pretty. Okay, and then I'm going to put it back in there. Peel this one off. Put it back in there. And then I'm going to do my soft suede. Make sure I'm using soft suede. Ink up my, oop. Nice thing about it is if I miss or I mess up, you can go right back in, make sure this is in place. We have that issue at class a few times, and I say make sure it's in the corner there. Okay, and we can pull those out, and we have another set of pine cones, and I'm going to set this aside. But see how fast you can get those done. Okay, so let's bring our cards back, and what we're going to do is just put him flat, and we're going to put this one on top. So we need our dimensionals. We need to close our stamp pads before we make a mess, and we're going to get our dimensionals back. And I'm just going to pop a dimensional on the back of the small pine cone, because I know I'm going to pop it up off the big pine cone. Do one here, didn't think I needed any more pine cones. And then I got the set and I'm like, happy I did. So we've got our pine cones, and then we can just put adhesive on the back of this pine cone here. Come on, Stampin' Seal, you still got a little juice left in you. Yeah, I thought so. Alrighty, and we're gonna put our pine cones right kind of on the top of that tag. And then I just use this really, really pretty sheer ribbon that's in real red that was a carryover from last holiday, and I'm glad they carried that over. That is so pretty. So we're just going to use a glue dot on the back of our bow and just pop it right on our pine cone. Did I put it? Yeah, I put it kind of on. You can kind of just put it anywhere you want on that card there. And another little glue dot on there. And then you can, you know, play around with your tails on your bow. But you've got the front of the card done. Now the inside of the card, this one's going to be portrait and this one's going to be landscape. So let's just pop these cards here. Okay, we're going to bring out the Merry Christmas, as you can see here. Now I put on here, from our family, Merry Christmas to you and yours. So we're just going to use real red for the Merry Christmas. And I do not want to, now see, this is dried now. We're going to use it. See, this is dried, and how easy you can take the adhesive off of it. It just rolls. And then I wonder why I have things on the bottom of my feet, huh? But I'm going to use my silicone craft mat because I am going to have a little bit of the stamp coming off of the side. So we're going to ink up Merry Christmas, making sure I don't have any edges. I think as I observe people at classes, one thing you got to make sure you do is always take a look at your stamp before you use it and make sure you've got good coverage and you don't have edges on there. Okay, so we're going to put Merry Christmas. There we go. And we're going to do that again. Another thing I find is if I take and I stamp upside down with my ink upside down, I tend to have a lighter touch and more control over my ink pad than whenever you do this into an ink pad, you tend to push it in. Where here, you're just tapping it. And once again, I look and make sure I don't have any edges. And then I'm going to do this one. And this is the one that's going to come off the sides. So I wanted to make sure. Merry Christmas. There. Okay, now I'm going to move this aside, and remember, don't forget to clean off these little pieces there, because then you'll go to use that again and you'll wonder, where did that red come from? So then we're going to use the other color we're using on here, and that's the Evening Evergreen, and we're going to stamp that little to you and yours. And this, in this instance, I will just do little taps here. On this one, when I have a little stamp, I do tend to go here, but I just go little taps. One, little tiny taps. And there we go. See, no ink around the edges there. And I can just pop, make sure it's going the right way. I can just pop that right at the bottom of the sentiment. There you go. And see, once again, tap, tap, little stamp, little taps, okay? No mess there. And then I'll put that at the bottom here. Now, what I see a lot at classes, people doing this. Oh yeah, and did you see there's a sale at Macy's today? Oh yeah, And then they get this, they get it on their fingers, they get it on the stamp, and then they go, let's just see, let's find a piece of scratch paper here. And then they go like this, they CPR stamp, pressing down, and they're like, oh, I got an edge. Well, if just a little bit of prepping, you won't end up with that mess if you do little taps, and always check your stamp. But just remember, these are big, juicy things, and You know, you're going to catch an edge if you're not. And like I said, there's another perfect example of what happens. So just, you know, I'm going to say, just take a little more time and see, I want to get all that ink off my fingers there. Now, of course, this is going to come off when I go wash it at the sink, but I know I've cleaned off my fingers. So when I go to put things back in place. So hopefully I wasn't being a nagging teacher there, but you know what? You guys have to put up with it if all the girls in Pittsburgh and Florida have to put up with me nagging them about their edges. So you got a little taste of me as your teacher. And just imagine if I was your homeschool mom. Oh my gosh. The kids tell me now, yeah, Mom, we remember when you did this and then you made us do this. I'm like, oh my gosh. I said, and are you trying to thank me now? So that was the greatest joy of my life. Having homeschooled the kids, it was so fun. And now that I have a little granddaughter and another one on the way, I'm so like, well, no, I don't know what this next one's going to be, but I'm just so thankful that I may have a little second round of homeschooling in me with those sweetie pies. Okay, so there is our landscape. And here is putting just a little glue, just a little bit of glue. A little bit, it goes a long way. Putting it just on the edges so that if you do a big squiggle all over there, I can guarantee you, especially with this dark paper, it is going to make a big mark. Take it from me, who does a lot of swaps with people, and you'll open up the card and you'll see big bubbles across here where the pieces of glue were. And then if it's a dark cardstock, it's going to press against that when it goes through the mailing machine, and it's going to look like blah whenever your recipient gets it. So on this card, if I was sending this to somebody, I would put a little piece of copy paper in here. I have a little stack of 4 1/4 by 5 1/2. I put a little piece of paper in there just so the green doesn't rub off on I'm not sure about the evening evergreen, but I know navy and black really does rub off. So look how pretty that simple little card, by just taking your designer series paper and cutting it from one corner to the other. And like I said, if you were using this peach paper, and you would only have to cut you would cut your initial piece and you could cut it with an X from diagonals. Like, let's just pretend you cut it this way and this way. You could mix and match these patterns. They will look fine together. It's just mine didn't. So since my patterns worked better using the painted Christmas and the Christmas tidings, because I like those prints, I stacked them on top of each other, and then I got 2 cards. So I was so tickled how this turned out. And once again, I want to thank you guys for spending a little time with me. And of course, I did not come up with this great technique. It's been around for decades, and I just happened to play around with it. So I want to thank you guys for stopping by, and well, actually, I want to say thanks for buzzing by. Subscribe to my blog right at the top underneath my photo on my blog. It says subscribe here. You'll get notified by email each time I post. I like to post Monday, Wednesday, Friday for sure, with a video on Wednesdays, and you can also subscribe to my YouTube channel and you'll be notified whenever I put out a new video. Thanks for buzzing by, friends.